good afternoon, everybody. Good morning if you're watching over the Atlantic. Good evening, or indeed good night if you're in Asia or beyond. Welcome to this conversation of In the Vineyard With. It gives me immense pleasure to introduce a remarkable man, one of the most important figures in the world of wine and a great ambassador of Bordeaux, Jean-Michel Cazes. Named Man of the Year by Decanter magazine in 2003, Jean-Michel's list of achievements is well documented and respected. But few of you will know that before he came and took over his family wine estate, he completed a master's degree in petroleum engineering in University of Texas in Austin. He was an officer in the French Air Force and a consultant at IBM France. So I'll move swiftly, I don't want to hear from me. And welcome Jean-Michel Cazes. Hello.
Thank you, hello. This is an experience for me. This is the first. That's the first time I'm talking to people so far away. It's very intimidating. But,
I hope it's going to be a positive encounter, and it's not a virtual tasting. I believe you took part in some, or led some virtual tastings recently, but this one is an interview, and we had some glitches before, but now it's all sorted, hopefully. So I will start. So first, the issue that is on everybody's mind, the lockdown now, and we all experiencing unprecedented times. And tell us how you coped with it and how you kept yourself busy.
The lockdown here in Baj, in Baj is, I must say, we are quite privileged. I mean, we have a nice house with enough space and a beautiful garden in the springtime, flowers all around the place, and the vineyards are growing fast. No, it's the activity in the vineyard is still going on. It's never stopped actually, because the vine doesn't stop growing. So you have to take care of it, and the people don't have to work all together packed. You know, they can work in each parcel. So we are very privileged to spend the lockdown, but I'd be happy to be out of the lockdown on Monday, because we don't go out very much. We have friends and people who deliver food here from farms nearby. So I wouldn't say it's vacation, but it's not bad, frankly.
I read a very entertaining blog that you started writing for the lockdown. What gave you the inspiration for that? And how did you find it writing your thoughts?
I thought would help me to spend time. and I don't know, I had lots of time to do anything, and I don't have any operational responsibilities now, so I have time to think, to write, to read. So I thought it was an opportunity to tell how a vineyard and the wine property goes through circumstances like the ones we are living through right now. That's the idea. I enjoy doing it. That's basically that's.
Excellent. So, well, the title of this talk is Jean-Michel Cazes, Past, Present, and Future. So, delving today. So we will get to the present, and we will get hopefully to some future. But
hopefully, yes.
We going back in time and to a different crisis. I'm not drawing comparisons between the crisis, the oil crisis of the 70s, but if you can cast your memory back.
It's all the crises in wine have one thing in common. they come from something which was absolutely not foreseen. You know, now, if the crisis come from this virus that nobody saw coming, and the same as in '91, for instance, we had a crisis in wine sales because of the war in Afghanistan, no, in Iraq. In '08, it was the subprimes. Nobody had saw income. And in '73, it was the oil shock. So every time there is something which disrupts the world we are living in, and that has consequences on the way we live. But this one here is different from the 3 or 4 cases I mentioned, because it's come from a different source, and the effect is totally different. I think it's not as, for wine, I'm talking about the wine industry, I don't think it's as bad as it was in '73 after the oil shock, because the circumstances at the time were different, the markets were different, the consumption habits were different, the prices were different, and wine did have a good reputation as a drink at the time, so we were not in good shape. It took us several years to recover, many years to recover. This time, there's a huge economic crisis, I'm sure, but I'm not an expert on that. But in terms of wine, it's different. People still drink wine. Drink wine at home. I have a friend in England who tells me, yes, but you're locked up with your wife usually, and you need friends to drink good wine. So it's a little true, but still, what we hear from the markets is that the restaurant business is totally stopped, that's for sure. But people keep drinking wine at home and for personal pleasure. And it's a good occasion to sample what they have in their cellars and no, it's so I forgot the question. What was it?
About the crisis. Well, I wanted to draw you back to your returning back to the family estate when your father called you back, and immediately after this crisis.
Well, the crisis, if we talk about historically, the wine history, the history of wine has been a succession of crises. The biggest one started with the phylloxera in 1880, roughly, and lasted almost 100 years. When in the 1930s, for instance, to give you an idea of the extension of the crisis, in Pauillac, where we have 18 classified vineyards of the 1855 classification, between 1929 and 1939, 15 of them went bankrupt. So that gives you an idea of the importance of the crisis at the time. It was absolutely no way you could make a living out of making wine, even good wines. So there were no investments for a long time, and I was born just before the war, and during all my youth, I never thought I would end up making wine, because there was no future in that business. You know, my father was making a living out of being an insurance agent. My grandfather had bought Lynch-Bage in '39 for a very small amount of money, but very difficult to make a living out of it. And so my idea was to get out as soon as possible of this difficult area, which I did when I was 18, and it took me 20 years to think I could ever come back, because things had changed in the meantime. And it was my father who asked me to come back. Actually, he thought I was crazy to be willing to go back to the vineyard area. And he looked at me and he said, "Are you crazy? You don't mean you want to go live in Pauillac?" I was living in Paris for 20 years.
I always thought it was his idea. He wanted you to come back, but
No, absolutely not. No, that was worse than that, much worse. As I said, the times were very difficult, and my grandfather was living on the property, and my father was living on the insurance business he had created and developed. You know, he was doing very well. And in 71, there was a move in the market a little bit. The US market started to develop in 70, 71, and the prices went up sharply. So suddenly it became a little better. And one day I was having lunch with my father in Paris, and he said, things are looking a little better now. Maybe we should take this opportunity to get rid of the vineyards. That's exactly what he said. And I don't know if he was joking or not, but my grandfather was very old. He was over 90 at the time. And my father was very busy. So I looked at him and said, well, look, and what about if I move down to Pauillac and I become an insurance agent too, like you are? And so we can live on your business, which is big enough, and we keep the vineyards. Said, well, so we talked about for 2 years, about that for 2 years. And I moved in 73, but at the time it was, and after 2 months, I went back to Pauillac. There was the oil shock. That was a big, it was very bad timing. And in the following years, I really wondered if I had made the right decision. But anyway, that's the past. And I'm very happy now I did. You know, I consider life is like it's a succession of bends, turns. You have to turn right or left. You don't really know. You do it by chance, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. In my case, I was very lucky because I decided to come back in 73. We had, that's true, about 5-6 years which were extremely difficult after that. But then it kept improving, and there was a revolution in winemaking. The techniques changed completely in the 70s and 80s, and the markets developed also. Before the 1970s, the only market for wine was Britain and the countries of Northern Europe. And then it developed in the US, then in Japan, then in Asia, in Switzerland, in Germany, Denmark. And being having been a student in Texas, I could speak English, or a kind of English at least. That I learned it in Austin, Texas, and it helped me a lot to develop the new markets that were opening up in the US, in particular the US in the 80s. So it's been a long, interesting ride with bumps, ups and downs, but and the vineyard management has changed a lot also in that period of time. The way wine is made today and is totally different what it was 50 years ago.
Absolutely. Well,
it's still a conversation, but
one of the anecdotes I wanted to raise with you is involving how different winemaking is back then to nowadays. But we'll get to that. But you said something about people enjoying their wine cellars during this crisis, and I remember reading an interview with you years ago, and where you said that even a great bottle of wine is not a great bottle of wine if it's not shared with friends. And I'm thinking, how do you find drinking wine now on your own or with family, but without friends?
It's difficult. It's difficult. That's for sure. Today, you know, to give me some energy to do this interview, I took a bottle of white wine, which I have here, and I'm going to have a sip right now. So talk too much.
So it's you came back from Paris and you took over, and it's and you explained that I think the markets started to open, and you found some inspiration. I think obviously 1973 maybe had a bit of another attraction or the attention on Pauillac because of a different event, and it's something that people may know, may not, but a neighboring estate managed to elevate itself, and a good friend of yours, which I hope that you can tell us about, the Baron Philippe de Rothschild, so maybe some of the attention on Pauillac then. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
About the Baron, he was a very good friend of my father's. My father was the mayor of Pauillac at the time. He was the mayor of Pauillac for 44 years, a long time. And he and Philippe Rothschild were friends, so they knew each other very well because they had conducted projects together for the city. Philippe used to live in Pauillac, not all the time, but a good part of the year. And he took part in the life of the community pretty much. And he had a tennis court, and my father used to play with him tennis, also with Jacques Chaban-Delmas, who was the mayor of Bordeaux at the time. And the three of them used to play doubles or at Mouton, which was, at the time there were not that many tennis courts in the area. And personally, I never played tennis with him. I played ping pong with table tennis with Philippe Rothschild. He was so funny because he hated losing. He always pretended the ball had touched the table, which was not true. So we were always going into big arguments about who won the point. He was a very interesting personality, very lively, very smart, and did a lot of good for his property and for the area. He transformed the way. He was the first one to understand that wine tourism was something important. When he took over in 1924, the Mouton, he decided to build a cellar, and he went to an architect whose experience was in theater. So he made a cellar which for the first time was made for visits. It was a beautiful long barrel cellar with very, very carefully placed lights, and it was very, very new at the time. He was very important.
About wine tourism, because it's the next point I wanted to touch on. Even as early as the mid-70s, I think you were ahead of the times, welcoming visitors to Langebage, and when you managed estates like Pichon-Boran, you welcomed professionals and public. And I wanted to know what inspired you. Was it your time in America that inspired you to think like that?
Well, the problem was simply that we needed customers. In 74, 75, we had nobody wanted to buy any wines. We were desperate to sell wine. So, and there were very few tourists before that period. When I was a kid here, I never saw a tourist. Nobody would come to the Médoc. It was a lost area. People would stop, the rare British people who come to Bordeaux, they would stop in Bordeaux and talk to the négociant, to the trade. They would never come to the vineyard. So it was very unusual. And then suddenly, starting in 74, 75, we saw people coming to the vineyard to visit the vineyard. They were the first one, they were Americans. I remember the first guy, I saw a guy in the yard in front of Langebage, but I didn't know him. And he said, "Who are you?" And he answered in English, and he was a retailer in Rochester, New York. Forgot his name. And we became friends after that. And so I realized that me and a few others in the area, like Jean-Eugène Bory at Duclos Bocaillou and Jean-Richard Molu in Monrose, and also the people at Mouton, that a tourist was not only a tourist, but also a possible drinker, a would-be drinker. So we decided to try to attract people as much as we could, but there was nothing there were no restaurants, there were no hotels, there were no facilities so it was a little difficult, and so it started like that, and people came more and more, and it started because we, excuse me, the people would say, "But do you sell any wine?" I say, "No, it's not our purpose. We want them to become our friends, and when they come back home, they will tell their friends to drink wine. They will buy wine in there." That's what the idea, you know. And progressively, it grew, and we had more and more. In '89, we decided to something also in 78, 79, I made a trip to America, and that was organized by the fellow who's a wonderful guy, was Miklos Dora, who is a Hungarian American, lives in America, and who was the personal assistant to Philippe Rothschild in America. And he was the one who introduced Philippe and Bob Mondavi of Napa, and was operational to put them together to make Opus One later on. And Mickey took me to see Robert Mondavi, and I went to Napa Valley in '79, and I saw people there that had understood that the tourism, they had San Francisco nearby, you know, so 1 million people there could come to the vineyards and would be customers, you know. And I was fascinated by the way they at Mondavi had organized their receptions for visitors, you know. And I sent my daughter Kinu there a few years after that for an internship at Mondavi in their tourism reception department to make a report to see how it worked. So it was an inspiration. And then and again with a few friends that were on the same page, like Bory and Charmolu and a couple of others. We tried to organize groups. We organized a group of wine growers, and we traveled together, and we were receiving people together also for the following years, all through the '80s.
And then if you stopped at the '80s, it's a good point, because I want to now jump to the '80s. In the '80s, you managed to, and I think still the only winemaker ever to send wine to space, and actually be lucky enough to get the bottle back, because if I was the astronaut, I don't know if I'll bring it back. But
it's a small bottle.
Yes, of the 1975, and it's I presume you still show it in the chateau.
Yes, it's in not here in my home. It's in the reception room we have in front.
You know,
it happened in '84. By the end of '84, around November '84, I get a phone call one night. I was in my insurance office at the time at 7 o'clock in the evening, and I get a guy, take a glass of water. And I hear someone with a very thick accent from the Pyrenees Mountains, you know, telling me, "Monsieur Cazes, yes, do you want to send your wine to the moon?" I say, "What? Something making a fool out of me, you know, so somebody is." But I recognized the voice, because he was a very well-known fashion designer by the name of Courrèges. And he was from Pau in the Pyrenees, and he had kept this big accent, you know. And so I said, okay, maybe it's him, really. And then he explained that he had met an astronaut that was going to fly with the space shuttle, the American space shuttle, who wanted to take some wine with him to make a statement about wine being important. Not there was no publicity involved in that. It was just the astronaut. He was originally from Bordeaux himself, and he wanted the wine of Bordeaux to be talked about on the occasion of this trip. And he had written to the official government of the Bordeaux wine, and nobody had answered him. So he had met this fashion designer, and he said, "I would like to take a Bordeaux wine, but nobody in Bordeaux is answering me." And that guy told him, "But you should call Jean-Michel Cazes. I don't know why. He may be interested." So I said, "Okay, I'm interested." And then I met the astronaut who came to Pauillac. We became friends, and in the beginning, it's a long story, but it's funny. In the beginning, he thought he wouldn't be allowed to bring any wine, So he said, "Don't think of a bottle, but maybe I'm allowed to bring some tapes, those magnetic tapes, cassettes." Walkman. I'm allowed for a Walkman, so maybe you could traffic to do something to a cassette and put a bag with wine in it, so it could say that there's some wine with me in the space shuttle. I said, okay. So for weeks after that, in my kitchen, I was working to taking the tape out of the cassette, sealing some plastic bags. It was leaking all over the place. It was terrible. Finally, I got 2 or 3 cassettes made with wine in them. And I was ready to give it to him. So he calls me from Houston, where he was at the Space Center, and he says, "I talked to the fellow at NASA. They're okay with a bottle of wine. We don't need the cassette." So, but a small one. It says they're okay for a small one. So I gave him. I flew to Houston, and I gave him 2 bottles of half bottles of 75 Lynch-Bage, and one of them went to not to the moon, but around the globe for 114 times. And then he invited me to the launch and also to the landing in California. It was fantastic. The only problem was that in the beginning, it was scheduled on Challenger, the space shuttle, and but Challenger didn't work very well. They were postponing the launch all the time, and finally it was canceled. So he was desperate, and he called me and said, "I will never fly, it's terrible." And after a few weeks, he calls me again. He said, "I'm rescheduling Discovery." Great, fantastic. So he flew actually on the June 15th, I think it was 1985, and I was there, Cape Canaveral, Cape Kennedy, with my family. The whole family made the trip to see him lift off. That was a fantastic memory.
Must be, yes. It's and I've seen an article when you had a bit of a reunion a couple of years ago in Bage. You had lunch with Patrick, the astronaut, and a bit of a reunion of after 30 odd years.
Oh, no, I met Patrick many times since, but in '85, after the flight, I invited the crew, the whole crew, the 7 astronauts that had flown on Discovery. They came to Pauillac, and they came with 2 or 3 helicopters, I remember. They landed on the football field in Pauillac. My father was the mayor at the time, so I had arranged a meeting at the reception at the city hall, and they went through the city with the music in front. They marched through the city. All the population was enthusiastic, and then I had organized a dinner in the cellar, in the barrel cellar. We had a big dinner there, but we had one little problem. Is among the 7 astronauts, there was 5 Americans, one French, and one Saudi Arabian, Prince Sultan, and the embassy of Saudi Arabia sent a helicopter at 6 o'clock in the evening to pick the prince out, so he couldn't be photographed with a glass of wine in the cellar. I shouldn't say that, but okay.
It's a fantastic story.
But he was a wonderful guy, by the way. He did very well. He looked like Omar Sharif, young, you know, in Dr. Zhivago. And he had big success in the streets of Hoya.
Well, another story that I personally loved when I met you a few years back is your how you came to produce your white wine. Now,
that's a different. That was in 78. We, you know, it's a long story too, but I'm going to make it short if I can. In the vineyards in the old days, you know, when you plant or replant a vineyard, you buy cuttings. And cuttings, they come in, it's a piece of wood, which is about 1 foot long. Yeah. And it's not written on the branch if it is red or what. You have to trust the nursery. So you receive thousands of them and you plant them and then they grow. And sometimes there's a mistake. You know, there's white grapes here and there. So in all the vineyards of the area, there were plants of white grapes scattered in the vineyard. And when I was a kid, usually we would go out in the vines in September to eat them. They were good to eat, and they usually ripen before the reds. So as soon as they were ripe, we would go pick them to eat, and we didn't pay much attention. And if we waited for the picking of the red grapes, the white grape would rot. So they would not be in good shape. 78, it was a pretty particular season. It was cold, but sunny, and for a long time, and dry. In September and October, we had 6 or 7 weeks of sunshine. That was really, so the white grapes did not rot that year. They kept ripening, and they came ripe, you know, we had never seen them in such a good condition. And Daniel Yos, who is our winemaker, has been our winemaker for 40 years now, tells me the whites look good this year. Maybe you should pick them apart from the others and make a white wine which you could drink at your beach house instead of buying some cheap white wine from Montreux-de-Mer. And I said, well, I don't know how to make white wine. He said, but I can try. He said, I had an internship in a cooperative in somewhere. I did some white. Okay, go ahead. So we took, we picked a few grapes. We put it in 2 barrels, and we fermented in the barrel, and it came out okay. So we drank it, we forgot about it. And every year we would pick like that 2 grapes ahead of the harvest, to the white grapes, for 2 barrels, to make 2 barrels, and we would produce for our own consumption, just for us. And in '88, we had an audit from the government, which comes to the cellars, you know, and they look at all the stock we have, the bottles, and they check on the volume, the color, everything, the years, the vintage, the appellation, and all that. And at the end of the day, there were 8 of them, I remember. They called me very late at night, at 10 o'clock, and they said, we are finished. Everything is okay, except we found 400 bottles of white wine which are not accounted for anywhere. I said, okay, this is our house wine. This is, no way. This is not legal. and you are going to be fined for that. And I got 3 fines: one for false declaration of crop, one false declaration of varietals, and false declaration of inventory. 3 fines of 5,000 francs each. And so I thought it was not funny at all. And I tried to convince them that no way, there was absolutely no way. So I decided I would try to make I was furious, actually. And I decided we had a piece of land that was suited to plant some white wines nearby, about 1 mile from Denchbach, which been belonging to us, but it was not inside Pauillac. So we couldn't use it to plant it with the red grapes and make wines of the Pauillac appellation with it. So it was not used. So we decided we planted a small vineyard there, and we did it the right way. And then we tried to sell it, which was not a piece of cake, because nobody wanted wine from Pauillac, white wine from Pauillac. What do you mean? It doesn't exist. Well, anyway, but it was a success, and Daniel made a very good job with this first white wine, and now we produce it's still a small production, but it's nice. Well, that's the story. That was we started in 78 making wine, but the first 10 years that was really not good, and they started to be good after 91.
It's a fantastic wine. I tasted it a few times, and now it's legendary, and it's going very quick. You can't. We have changed a little bit the mix, the varietal mix. We have now we are very large percentage of Sauvignon. Mm-hmm. In the beginning, we started with Semillon, about half Semillon, half Sauvignon, and a bit of Muscadel. We have kept the Muscadel, but we have gone down with the Semillon to increase the. Oh, I lost you. Okay, I'm here. Yeah.
I lost you. Maybe it's the time. Time is over.
No, it's we're here. Can you see me?
Here you're back again. Good. So that's the story, and it's been fun. But since we are making now wines from white wine from other areas, we are making wine in Languedoc, whites, reds, and rosé, which is excellent, and also in Châteauneuf-du-Pape. This one is the one I'm drinking right now, Domaine de Sénéchaux, and it's a white wine. At this time of the day, there's nothing better.
Well, Sénéchaux is maybe the latest acquisition, but I wanted to ask you about the other ventures, because obviously from Bordeaux you went to Languedoc, Minervois, even the Douro in Portugal. And Daniel, I take it, Daniel Loss that you mentioned before, is a big influence and the drive behind the winemaking of all these different projects. I remember talking to him, and he was saying how many hundreds of thousands of miles he's doing a year in his car. And so maybe you can tell us one project that or closest, or the ones that you excited you the most. Or you can highlight all of them if you want.
Love them all, but no, I don't know. Well, actually, for many years I was involved with AXA and building up a portfolio of properties in Bordeaux, but also in Portugal, and then that came to an end in 2001, and from then I started to look around, because I had I felt like keeping in contact with other regions, I think the two projects which are, well, we have outside Bordeaux, we have three at the moment. We have Châteauneuf-du-Pape, which is not a big project. It's only 27 hectares, but high quality, and we produce red and wine. And this is really interesting to push the quality to its maximum there. But it's a well-known vineyard. I mean, it's not a new venture. But like in Languedoc, where we have been since 2002, almost 20 years now, this is more it's more of an adventure, because the area is not as developed, it's not as well known. It has a great potential for making good wines, but we had to adopt our techniques. In Portugal also is in a different way is fascinating. It's they're very different. When all these projects are, each of them is interesting, and but they are different, and they are different from. You know what I think is very interesting to have operations in various areas is that it's important for the winemaker in Bordeaux to be exposed to other ways of doing, other ways of thinking, to other people from other areas. Would it be in Spain, in Italy, in the south, in the Rhone, in Napa, anywhere? So I think we all have to gain through exchange of information and experiences. And the fact that we have operations in the 4 different areas, which are very different wine-wise, I think it's a plus for every one of us, if you see what I mean. Yes,
absolutely. And again, another project that I think I wanted to hear a little bit about is, and it ties together with your vision of wine tourism, is your development of Bages. I remember visiting Bages in 22 years ago, and it was a very sleepy, very
abandoned.
Yes, and I just passed by, and it was now it's a completely different thing that you developed and revived. So maybe
what happened was that in the early 2000s, we I want to make a long story short, I needed extra space for storage. Because we had a storage before that we didn't use anymore, and we needed one in somewhere in Bages. And so I asked the architect, do you have an idea where could we build a warehouse to store our bottles? And he comes back after a couple of weeks with a drawing of the village, and there was a big rectangle in the middle, and here you have your 20,000 square feet or whatever we needed, I don't remember. And I said, what are the dotted lines in the middle of the rectangle? He said that are houses. They said, well, we can't build if houses there. He said, I checked at the city hall, they all belong to you. These houses are ruins, and I realized that, which I knew, but I had never realized, that the village had been emptied of its inhabitants over the last 50 years. But people in the small hamlets like Bages, sometimes their kids don't want to work in the vineyard. They leave. They become firemen or policemen somewhere in Bordeaux or elsewhere, and they leave. And along the years, when they leave, they usually have a house which are not been maintained for many years usually, and they come to the next guy, who is my grandfather, then my father and myself, and they said, we are leaving, do you want my house and the little garden? Which I say, okay. And he said, okay, for the garden, but the house, we don't need it. Okay, but you have to take the house. So we would buy the house too. So I realized in 2002 that we owned the village, actually, it was empty, and we owned it, most of it. Not all the village, but all the central part of the village. So solution was to tear everything down and effectively build a big storage, which I decided not to do. And because this village, I spent my youth in the village, where we used to run in the streets with the kids, and it was really painful for me to imagine that I would be the one to erase the place totally. So I said, well, maybe we have another solution for the storage, and we did something else elsewhere, more convenient, better located. And then what do we do with the village? Well, we're going to try to revive it. So what do we need to make a village live? We need a cafe first. That's the most important. Then we need a store. And this, I was coming back with my son. We had been to Australia the year before, in 2001. And in Australia, we had seen all the wineries with those, they call cellar door shops, you know. And I was very interested by that concept, because we didn't have that in Bordeaux at all at the time. So I said, maybe we could do something like a cellar door, and not to sell wine, because again, we don't want to sell direct to, we are not interested in selling to tourists that much, because we want the tourists to be convinced it's a good place and to buy the wine when they're at home. It's different. So a shop, and then we had all sorts of strange ideas. I wanted to build a movie theater and a restaurant and a chapel. I have not. My wife wants me to build a chapel. I promised I would build a chapel someday, but not done it yet. But
there's an excellent bakery. There's a butcher. It's a
bakery. It's a shop. So there was a bakery. The bakery is closed now because it's very difficult to keep a baker operational nowadays in a small village like this. But we have other shops. We have a guy who does bicycle rental and things. Well, there is life now in and the bistro, the Café La Vinale, that really has become a center of the social life in the Médoc. The good point to start an afternoon of visit. That was we started in 2002. It took us about 6 or 7 years because we had to redo everything, including the pavement, and everything was
no, it's unrecognizable from my visit back in 1990.
Oh, it's changed. I must say it changed a lot, yes.
And I must say the next time I came was in 2016 to, I tasted your wine actually in La Vinale, a beautiful cafe, and excellent food and wine. And I came over to make some wine at Viniv, which is a winery in Bâche.
Oh, yes. So we have Viniv. Viniv, the winery of Viniv is a former winery of a grower, a Bâche grower who has abandoned a long time ago. But there was this huge big cellar. You know, it was we have renovated it and remodeled the place into a nice barrel cellar and everything. And Viniv has its home now in the village of Bâche, right next to Lynch-Bâche Cellars.
And you must be very keen, because I've tasted 3, I think, out of the 4 wines that you made there. And you like the blending and making.
Oh, you mean at Viniv?
Yes.
But Viniv is, you know it, I'm sure it's a company that contracts with the growers in the Bordeaux area in some good appellations like Pomerol, Saint-Émilion, Médoc, Margaux. I think altogether 13 appellations. And we use these grapes and these wines to do some bespoke wines for individuals. So there are people coming from all over the world to do their own wine with their own label. Vinif has a service to make original labels and also to do all the legal work around the wine. And personally, I make three different wines, 3 different labels with Vinif. And one is the label is Loujanou, which honors my great-grandfather who had the good idea to settle in Pauillac in 1775. And that's a label in his honor. And another one was made to celebrate the 15 years or 10 years of Café La Vinale, the 10th anniversary of Café La Vinale. We have a special label for that, and a special wine. And the third wine, it's a group of 6 friends, 5 personal friends and myself. We get together to make our personal blend from. But I don't want to make Pauillac style wines at Vinif. I want to make Saint-Émilion, right bank style.
Yes, I was tempted to ask about that.
Comment?
I was tempted to ask if you loyal to the Pauillac.
It's not a matter of being loyal or not. I mean, it's we decided to. Pauillac I have. I don't need to make more Pauillac.
Yes.
But,
so all three blends.
We use Cabernet Franc and Merlot essentially for this blend.
Excellent. So
and we gave it a name in Basque because my friends, some of them are Basque or live on the Basque coast, and it's called Sei Lagunac, which means 6 friends.
Excellent. Well, so since 2006 you retired. It's
retired in 2008, yes.
Yes, and 2008. So it's 12 years since retirement. And how do you keep yourself busy?
Always something.
You think you're still inspiring the family because obviously
No, I mean. My son is running the company at the moment, and he does a very good job. I'm happy that he handles the everyday burden of the responsibilities, operations, which I wouldn't be able to. I wouldn't be fit to do. But we have a good relationship, and my role is to keep the cohesion of the company and the family also, because he has 3 sisters who are interested, and some of them are, all of them more or less are take part in the operations. So the eldest is in New York, is in charge of represents us on the market in North America in particular, and another one is here in Pauillac, takes care of our internet activity. And so cohesion is important, and also I see visitors, and the third, I was trying to my third daughter has a role in the law questions. Also, she
all the legal stuff.
Yes, and so I've kept a lot of contacts around the world since my years where I used to travel a lot, and sometimes people ask me what is it like to as a business. I mean, it's about making friends. Wine is about making friends, and I believe that strongly. And over all these years I've been traveling around the world to promote the wine, and I made friends. I was talking about Miklos Dora, who was the Hungarian guy in America. You know, next month is going to celebrate his 107th birthday.
Wow.
Keep drinking wine.
Yeah, that's a good message. That's a good message.
Lives in Connecticut right now, and so I met so many interesting people, and you know, tourism also brings you people you would never have the chance to meet if I'd remained an IBM engineer in Paris, maybe I would have had a good career, and which is great, but I would never have had the opportunity to meet so diverse people with different backgrounds, and movie stars, professors, you name it, you know. People drinking wine is a link, you know, with people.
Absolutely.
It's very important. So part of my time is spent to keep in touch with the people abroad, to receive visitors sometimes, to come here, and I never get bored.
Excellent. Well, going now to the present and the near future, most of us will know about the new winery that you're building, and it's a ambitious project, and it's you have a lot of excitement. I love the old winery at Lange, but I understand the ambition and the vision. So how is it going with the lockdown, and when is it due to finish?
We were supposed to. We started 3.5 years ago, so it's a major project, reconstruction, total reconstruction of the winery. Because what happened was that when I came here 50 years ago now, the place had not seen anything done since 1870. You know, it was the same condition, so it was terrible. So we had to cope with that situation, to modernize the winery in the 70s and 80s, because at the same time the winemaking techniques were changing, you know, and the equipment we had was totally unadapted to the modern winemaking. So we didn't have, we had no money at the time, so we did what we could. We enlarged the facility. We used all the buildings, like we had a building with cattle and horses and cows. We turned it into a fermenting room, and well, it was over the years, you know, we had a very modern winery in the early 2000s, but made over a period of 25 years. And it was not homogeneous, and it was not very convenient, and it was also being there was new things coming, you know, it was impossible to adapt. So we decided we had to modernize. So then, once you say that, you have to say, do we start from scratch and build all over again, or do we adapt what we have? And after some thinking, because it's a big decision, we decided to start from scratch, to build the winery we would need in 2020. And we started about 3.5 years ago with the goal of being ready by the harvest of last year in 2019. We missed the post, and we were supposed to be ready by April, May, now at the moment, all finished. But with this virus situation, the construction has stopped for about 6 weeks, 5-6 weeks. But they have resumed working now, and will be ready by. We'll certainly be ready by the harvest. No problem with that. And over the summer, it will be finished. Maybe the lawns around it will be finished, but that's not a big problem. So it's been a long period of time when we have had to use a temporary facility that we built nearby, about 500 yards from here. And in 2020, we'll start in the new system. So now, why do we have to change everything? That's a question you didn't ask, but I'm going to tell you. It's very important because the big change in the last 20 years in winemaking is not in the winemaking, is in the vineyard. In the vineyard, there made so big progress in the control, the management of the vineyard, that today, basically now we monitor each parcel to the smallest homogeneous part, which does not necessarily correspond to the physical parcels. And so it's too long to explain in detail, but we use all sorts of techniques, and we come out with homogeneous batches of grapes, which are relatively small, many and small. So instead of having the vats that we've been installing everywhere in the area for the past 25 years or 30 years, which were about 200 hectoliters, we needed about half the size of the vats to be efficient, to do a good work in selections, so now we will have vats which are about half the size of the ones we had before, which will allow us to make more precise work, or at least to make it easy to make a more precise work. We could do a precise work before, but it was, at times it became a headache, And my principle is when things are done easily, they are done better. Well.
Yes, you have more chance to vinify separately, which is important, and
very important. Because of other selections, and the selection starts in the vine, in the grapes, not in the.
I'm not going to enter the discussion of all the new grape varieties that are permitted now for Bordeaux, because it's a complete different discussion about viticulture and vinification. But I'm sure that people will be curious to hear about it's all to do with global warming and with trying to keep.
I'm not an expert. This is certainly a fascinating subject, but really not an expert. I have the impression that before going to new varietals, we should try to see what we can do, what we have. I mean, there are things. Again, I'm not a specialist, so I don't want to get too much into that, but because it's very technical, I think the way the vine is monitored has something to do with its resistance to the climate change, but also some varietals like Petit Verdot, for instance, seems to be well adapted. It's to a warmer climate, and it's also a very good quality-wise. It's a very good grape for Bordeaux. That was not very used because it ripens late, and sometimes doesn't ripen enough. But with a slightly warmer temperature, Petit Verdot comes to good maturity and can get very good results. Now, other varietals have no competence to talk about that, and I trust the people in the research groups to tell us what is good. But I'm less and less interested in what's going to happen 50 years from now.
Yeah, I had a question ready about your vision for Bordeaux in 10 or 20 years' time, but I think you pretty much answered that. And
I would like to know what's going to happen in 2 years.
Yes. Well,
my experience is that it's very difficult to make any plans.
exactly. Well, finally, this conversation will not be complete, for me at least, if I won't ask you for your desert island wines or desert island bottles, or 1 or 2 bottles. What would be your choice to take to a desert island?
I never thought of it.
And it's not the same as a lockdown.
Do you think it would be by myself? Desert island?
You know, you can take a Friday.
A good wine by yourself is not the thing to do. I mean, it's you need friends. So I don't know if you find friends in a desert island, but I don't know. I mean, I could. What are the wines I prefer? I like. Well, to be honest, I like many wines, and I don't have a favorite wine. Something I like to say is that when you drink wine, you travel. That is, if you are a hard liquor drinker, for instance, you have a brand of whiskey that you like. You drink Valentine's, you drink whatever, and you stick to that because the one you know, that the one you like, and you don't accept practically anything else. You want that. You want to your black label, and that's the one you want. For wine, it's different. Because what you want today, let's see and have a visit to Saint-Emilion. Now today I have this to eat, so I'm going to have a good Pauillac to go with the lamb. You know, there's so much variety in wine. That's what makes the whole thing interesting. It's then tomorrow tonight, for instance, I like to open a small of these 50 centiliters bottles of Tokai to drink dry Samaroni from my friend Samuel Tinon in Tokai. Maybe I will call him on the phone, tell him I'm bringing you wine. You know, this is what wine is all about, and it's relationships, visit, travel, curiosity. Curiosity is key. So in a desert island, I don't know. I have no idea what I would bring. I like all sorts of wine. Of course, I would bring mine, for the wines we produce, but I don't know.
I'm sure that I can hear people. I can hear people asking, what vintage would you choose?
Vintage. This is another thing which is important about the wine. Is not only a traveling experience. It's also I like wines which tell a story, and because it's a wonderful things to start a conversation with friends. You know, that's why you need friends. That island is not the right situation to drink a good wine, and the vintage is part of the story. For instance, of course, the birthdays. That's obvious. You're born this year. Okay, we drink a bottle of your age, and but any vintage is an occasion to. For instance, the other day I opened. I was here by myself, and I needed a wine to go with. We had some lamb, you know, and I opened. I have half bottles of 52 Dengebage, which is a very, very good vintage. Totally forgotten vintage, because 53 was very good, and the people they liked 53, so they decided that 52 was not good, which is not true. 52 is an excellent vintage, and for me it was the occasion to remind me of who made the wine at the time. You know, who was the cellar master, was Roger, and whom I met at the time. My grandfather was responsible for the. So it links you to the time you. For instance, you are from Israel, I understand, if I understand.
Yes, yes.
In 2000, with my family, we were in Jerusalem, and for the January 1st, and we watched the sunrise above the plain to the Dead Sea from the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem at 5 o'clock in the morning. In 2000, every time I drink a 2000, I think of that.
The sunrise of the new millennium over the Dead Sea.
Absolutely.
Yes, it's memories. Well,
so the vintages. So now they are good and bad, and the bad vintages you forget, the good you remember, and there are some which are forgotten, which you are happy to discover, like the 52. That was a fabulous experience, and but now we are facing the 19, which is the last one, our last baby, and I was tasting it yesterday because we will probably release the wine in the weeks to come. I don't know when yet, and it was very impressive, beautiful vintage, but. It's too early to. I like old wines to sum it up because it reminds you so many things, you know. Yeah. I love it.
Well, Jean-Michel Cazes, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Well, the plan originally was to come to Bordeaux and do a recording with you, but here's if you can call it an advantage of the times we're living in, we thought instead of doing it face to face, and then it's just you, me, and a microphone, we will involve everybody.
That's a strange experience.
It is a strange experience, but I have to say, I'm recording this conversation, so if you missed it, dear audience, or if you just caught part of it, or if you just want to share it with your friends, it will be available in 2 or 3 hours on my website, which is www.inthevineyardwith.com, all one word, In the Vineyard With. Today I had the pleasure to be in the vineyard with Jean-Michel Cazes in the virtual vineyard. There's a beautiful landscape behind you. So thank you, and thank you everybody for joining.
There is a storm coming. I realized I didn't turn on the lights, and it's becoming very dark.
No, the setting is perfect.
There is a big cloud outside coming in.
Okay, if we hear some thunder, no, don't be too alarmed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Take care.